So good morning and welcome to the much maligned city of Bradford. I must say, having been there in the last few days, is that it hasn't changed much. In fact, it might be worse than it has ever been, but I've seen it. But it's such an important and interesting city to go and have a look around. And that's really what we're going to concentrate on today. Got some film as well of up and down the streets, so you can actually see what's going on. Like I've mentioned, I've filmed this fairly recently. It was this last weekend. And the other bit of film, I think, is from 2019 as well. So that's the City Hall. Let's have a quick look at the topography of it. It sits in a bowl around here, surrounded by hills. It hasn't got a major river running through it. It's just got Bradford Beck, which flows through the city centre. It's completely culverted, and so you can hardly see it at all. And then it runs down the valley to Shipley and then empties into the River Aire down there. And so it's surrounded by high ground. Like I say, above Shipley is, like I say, where there are signs of human habitation in the very early days above on Shipley Glen itself. But there's really not much to have been found around the bowl, largely because I guess it would be so boggy in the ground around there. I guess the oldest relic, which you'll see on Wednesday, is in the cathedral, which is a broken preaching cross in there, thought to date from the 9th or 10th century. It is mentioned in the Domesday Book, and like I say, it's valued at £4, and it hasn't sort of been laid waste to at all, which is quite surprising. But perhaps there wasn't many people living in the area at the time. It says there, pre-1066, it was owned by Gamel, son of Bath, but the lands were given by Edward the Conqueror, William the Conqueror, in around about 1066 to Ilbert de Lacy, the chap who was given lands in Leeds and had Pontefract Castle built. It sort of grew quite rapidly in the medieval times. It was given a market charter in 1147, and the market cross that we can see here was raised in 1251. The market charter was renewed in 1294. The market, like all markets, were held nearest to the church to begin with, and then moved on to Westgate. Largely is that Bradford is really made up of a crossroads that we'll see. There's Ivegate, Westgate, and Curt Gate, and this is where where those three roads meet. That's where where Curt Gate Market is today. That's where the market cross was at one time. That was until 1801, and then seemed to have moved around a little bit, just further down Curt Gate then, and then was moved out to Peel Park and then brought back inside. This is inside the Curt Gate Market. You probably, if you've been in Curt Gate Market, you've probably never seen it. It's on the backside of the indoor market there that leads out onto Westgate outside, down a ramp that goes outside there. So it's not likely that, I don't know why they've not put it in the centre of the market or something like that. So it's in the really hidden away at the back of it there. But you can see it's actually enormous market cross, and because it stood higher than that, but was broken during the Civil War, so 1642, 1645 period, because the Bradford was laid siege to a number of times that we'll see later on. Because it was laid siege to up on the in the church. You can actually see bullet holes on the church tower, but like I said, that'll be on Wednesday. The first, because there's obviously been a church up there probably since about the 10th century, but the first rector was appointed in 1241, and like I say, in that time it was emerging. 1277, there was the first record of a wool weaver here. Like I say, around about 50 years later, 1311, that there was a fulling mill here as well. It was quite a large city, but its estimated population around sort of the 1320s was about 650 people, much probably equivalent to the size of Leeds. Because there were little bits of industry around here. There's coal being dug in the area, but because it's very poor coal in the some parts of the Bradford district. But then after the Black Death, it had a drop in population to half what it was before that, 325 people in the poll tax of 1378. The cathedral that we see today was built in 1431. and a little bit more about it was when John Leland, the antiquary to Henry VIII, came in the 1540s, said that Bradford is a pretty quick market town. It standeth much by clothing, and it certainly will do when we come to the 19th century. We see here 1662 that the grammar school was founded as well. So moving into the sort of Civil War, and because I've mentioned that it's been attacked twice during that period, and I guess I'll give a bit more of an account to it there. But you can see the woolsacks being hung here from the cathedral tower there. Really is that it sort of came to and fro, the war did, through here. It was a parliamentarian stronghold at one time, but the royalists took it on the 18th of December 1642, and that was under the first siege of Bradford, and then took it back again in June 1643 when the parliamentarians were defeated at the Battle of Adwalton Moor. That's sort of between Bradford and Leeds at Driglington, if you know that area at all. And I say then the parliamentarians retook it off the royalists in 1644, and so that was really the end of the Civil War in Bradford. But it didn't really escape a lot more in 1645 because a plague broke out in the town, so much ravaged at that time, and then the plague breaking out. So around 1700 is that we see the population being roughly around about 4,000 people, and by 1800 this had grown to 13,000. But it was really, this is the sort of age of development that was about to start in Bradford. We see a lot of the trade being opened up when the Leeds-Liverpool Canal was built. It sort of first opened in this section around here, 1777. And there was a branch down from Shipley right into the centre of Bradford. You can see coming down here where the canal is and the canal wharf, going really into the area between the what is Forster Square railway station, which is just about here. I can see where the cathedral is over here. And so that's where it came in. Partially using, you can see down here, water from Bradford Beck coming along there as well. So really the road that runs from Bradford to Shipley near enough runs along the side of that canal. As we'll see, that canal was filled in because it thought it would bring a lot of problems into the city centre itself, and has been filled in since then. There's always been talk about sort of reopening it or redigging it out to create sort of more sort of tourist traffic into the city centre. We see that the Methodists came in 1744, and so with all that cloth trade around, the banking sector grew as well. 1760 was the first Bradford Bank was established. With the trade in the textile, 1769, it had its first Peace Hall built, because they later superseded by the Wool Exchange. So it wasn't just in the city centre, but just outside the city centre, but Bowling, or Bolling, as they sometimes call it, up near the end of the M621. There's a huge, well, there are two huge ironworks up there. The Bowling or Bolling Iron Company, founded in 1778, and a decade later, the Low Moor Iron Company was founded. Up there was seams of fairly high quality coal, as well as ironstone as well. And there's two huge manufactories up there. But we also see towards the end of the 18th century, the wool industry changing. It was making sort of rough kersey material. That's really sort of everyday workwear that they were making here. Very poor quality, and because they really sort of the cheapest sort of cloth that you could make. And then it started going into the worsted spinning around this time. And really that what was to emerge really in the 1820s onwards with the building of the huge mills around there. And so we see the sort of change from the water-powered mills, and in 1798, the first steam-powered worsted mill was in operation in the city itself. But like I say, it was sort of just emerging at the beginning of the 19th century, but it was really with the production of this worsted cloth, very, very high quality, that made it suddenly the centre for the textile industry, not just in Britain. It outstripped places like Norwich, Wakefield, Halifax and Leeds, but worldwide as well. So they were exporting this all over the place. And we see the sort of growth in the number of mills. 1810, there were just 5 worsted mills in Bradford.
Bradford, 1820, 20 worsted mills, and giving it a city a population in 1821 of 26,309. So near enough 13,000 added onto that population of around about 1,800 as well. So really doubling in that 20 years. And so we see other banks emerging as well. Like I said, there's a story of the banking industry. That's why there are so many of these fine, grandiose banks in the city. 1803, we have the Bradford Old Bank being established. 1818, the Bradford Savings Bank as well. It didn't sort of go without sort of a lot of problems within the city. People were poorly paid in there. They had a strike in 1825. This was a period, sort of a fairly revolutionary period in British history as well. But it continued to grow. Population 1831, 43,257. And really, it sort of because of that worsted industry itself. Now, 1834, 39 worsted mills in Bradford. 1841, the population 66,000. So another growth of 20 odd thousand within that decade as well. And 83 worsted mills operating by 1850 as well. So not only were there worsted mills, but it was developing as a city centre. The well-known landmark store, Brown Muffs, was founded in 1845. I can see that building, but that was in the coming of the railway in 1846. This is a line down the Aire Valley from Leeds into the city centre of Bradford. That was what's now called the interchange station. The Forster Square station. That was the first line into Bradford. The second line came in what is now the interchange station by St George's Hall. That was a bit of a more direct line straight to Leeds, but that was largely due to the railway companies because they're trying to outdo one another as well. And so we see that sort of 1853, 153 mills in Bradford. There were 48 collieries by the end of that decade, and they were mining 967,000 tons of coal as well. And so we see that merchants pouring into the town, especially those ones where the warehouses were built in Little Germany that will be going round on Wednesday as well. And so we really have some sort of large textile barons here as well. The two notable ones are Samuel Cunliffe Lister and Titus Salt, both innovators really in the fashion fabrics, lusterware and velvets, because they're mixing sort of cotton and silk with worsted to produce these fashion fabrics as well. And really they sort of demand outstrip production at their mills, leading to the building of the largest mill in Bradford, Manningham Mills by Cunliffe Lister, that opened in 1871. But really at that time is that the sort of golden age of the worsted industry was starting to falter, largely due to protectionism in the Americas and cheaper imports coming in, like I say, from Turkey, the Middle East, and other parts of Europe as well. And that we also see is that there was no real new innovations that people wanted to buy. So we're buying really on cost in there. And so it was a very important city. It was given city status in 1897. And because they had many social problems, you can see from this drawing here, the huge amount of sort of pollution in the air, because they've no major river apart from the River Aire being 4 miles away. So they had to pipe water in, and that came from the top of Nidderdale, sort of 35 miles away, sort of brought in through sort of tunnels and channels all the way down there as well. And some of the river water coming from sort of the Barden reservoirs up on the Bolton Abbey estate. There were also, beyond that, in sanitary problems here as well. A cholera epidemic in 1849 killed 426 people, largely due to the sort of poor water and living conditions around here as well. But people wanted to move out, and with the arrival of the electric tram in 1898 is that people started to move out of the city centre to live at places like Nabwood, beyond Shipley, and other places like that.
But the textile industry was starting to go into decline even at the beginning of the sort of 20th century, but its life was really extended by the two world wars. And they also had some new industries open up in here. Jowett made cars in the city, and it also became a centre for the printing industry, or the printing engineering and printing industry as well. International Harvesters made tractors here, and Fawn built TVs and electrical goods. We also had the start of Morrison's. I guess that's really coming into the rise in the sort of 1960s, although it was founded in 1899. We also see two huge home shopping places as well. The Grattan's and Empire Stores operated out of Bradford. I guess some of those starting off from very small concerns in the 1920s. But I guess the ironworks out at Bolling, they both closed in the 1920s, but they lost really after the Second World War, after that last sort of boom for these textile companies. Many of them were very small, and the government in 1958 actually gave grants for a lot of these companies either to close down or to invest in new machinery and to become more productive in that. And that's what we see, that the sort of the number of mills, the smaller mills, declining. There's still a few operating in the city today, but they tend to be very specialist mills to meet, say, a niche sector in there. We also had the Bradford University opening in 1966, and really that sort of decade was a very poor decade for Bradford. As you can see from this photograph here, was really it saw the demolition of most of the towns of the city centre, losing most of its fine Victorian shops and arcades as well. And I could say some of them, this is the area that we're looking at down here, is where the Broadway development is today, the sort of industrial shed shopping centre that opened in 2015. And then we've also seen that the other fine building, the Curt Gate Market, as it was then, a lovely looking building, that was also demolished for the Curt Gate Market Centre that we see today, which I think opened in 1973. And then we also have, to make it more competitive in the industry, a lot of people coming from the Indian subcontinent coming into Bradford and making some of those areas quite ghetto-like in a way, and obviously making some people afraid to go into the city centre because quite often sounds a bit racist, but it's not meant to be, but white people can quite often be the minority in the city centre. Although there's not much to see in there as well. And so really a lot of this is sort of down to the local authority of actually never sort of taking a grip after the 1960s and allowing things like the shopping centres, Broadway to be opened. And when you look round today is how many closed shops there were even before the COVID pandemic striking as well, and allowing them to build sort of out shopping centres just on the doorstep of the city centre, like the Forster Square development, where there's free car parking, but you have to pay for car parking in the city centre, and all the shops have sort of either gravitated to there or into the Broadway centre, leaving Darley Street, once the main shopping street, absolutely sort of redundant. But they have tried to make it back in a way. 1983, that we see the opening of the National Media Museum. We've also got the Alhambra Theatre that opened in 1913, and next to it the Odeon Cinema opened in the 1930s, and that is just about to be converted now into a live music venue, and I think the contract was only awarded last week for that. I think that's £21 million to do that. It will seat 4,000 people when that opens. So I think I got a bit ahead of myself there. But so it seems to be sort of quite often in sort of a terminal decline, and say that was the sort of problem of it. It became the UNESCO City of Film in 2009, although the Media Museum doesn't lead on sort of film anymore. And so that got into financial difficulties in 2015. And when the photographic collection was moved from Bradford down to London, and it was rebranded the National Science and Media Museum. Like I say, the St George's Hall, that's the one that was won by Mawson and I thought the name of a child, Lockwood and Mawson, in a competition in 1849. That has just been refurbished as well. I think the COVID pandemic has sort of stopped. I think it's only had 1 or 2 concerts in there before it drew to a close. But it's still a major city today. Sort of just over 500,000 people live in it, and like I say, just 9 miles from the city centre of Leeds, and the two places couldn't be far different from one another. Just looking at the coat of arms, because they've got 2, the most recent one there, but the traditional is this one here, and it's got a boar's head on the top of it. And the reason for that is that, like I say, in the Middle Ages, is that there was a particularly violent boar in the vicinity, and a price was put on its head for the person that killed it. A man killed it in Cliff Wood and took out its tongue to claim the reward. A man watching severed the boar's head and took it first to claim the reward. It was then asked where the boar's tongue was, but he couldn't explain that until a man with a tongue claimed to claim the reward. And that's why we see the boar on there, and it doesn't have a tongue in its mouth. And like I say, the other ones here are sort of sheep representing the textile industry as well. The motto down there translates as "Labour overcomes all things." That was given in 1847, the coat of arms around here. The most recent one, it dates from 1976. Still got the boar on top without its tongue in it. So I'm going to split this in 2, this walk around the city centre. I'm going to set off and end at the City Hall, or first built as a town hall before it got city status, and then going up Ivegate onto Westgate, coming up to where the Osler Market is up here, in this area here, and then coming along onto Manor Road. This is where the Yorkshire Penny Bank is here. There's a dual carriageway that comes around here, so that sort of contains the city centre. There has been some sort of shops the other side, but they haven't fared very well at all, and they're now sort of empty this side, largely because of this dual carriageway cutting the city centre off. Then coming down Manor Road, which then turns into Cheapside, and going to drop down to Forster Square Station, come down here, the what was once the main shopping centre in here, down the side of Kirkgate Market, and then they're going to come round here and finish at the Wool Exchange today on Market Street, which is in that little triangle there. So on Wednesday, I'll pick up the rest of the route coming around here, going through Little Germany and into the Cathedral. And these were the National Media Museum. Here's St George's Hall there, the Alhambra and the Odeon Cinema on that section around there. So this is the first section I'm going to do today. I can't join these up because there isn't a bit of a link through here on Google Maps, but I'm setting off, like I mentioned, at the City Hall. I'm going to come through this arc of buildings here, which then takes us into Sunbridge Wells, and then coming up Sunbridge Wells onto Sunbridge Road, which is built above the wells, and then coming down to really just within a few hundred feet of where the City Hall is today, really at the end of Tyrrell Street. And then the next one, I'm going to go up Ivegate, and later on I'm going to come down this section of Ivegate to take in this area around there. So let's have a look at the City Hall to begin with. This very fine building, designed by Lockwood and Mawson in 1873, because it was built as a town hall, because Bradford didn't get city status until 1897. But it's only been called the City Hall since 1965. It's based on a 13th century Gothic Italian campanile clock tower. So I think it's one of the finest buildings in Bradford. And at the moment, it's got lots of space around it, so you can actually appreciate that building. A lot of Bradford's history, or Victorian history we see today, is largely due to these two men, Lockwood and Mawson.
Henry Lockwood was born in Doncaster, 18th of September 1811. His father was a stonemason and builder. His grandfather owned quarries and was twice Lord Mayor of Doncaster. So he didn't come from a poor family. He went to London to study architecture and was articled to an architect down there called Peter Robinson. His first job up in Yorkshire was an extension to York Castle in 1824. But he set up his own business in 1834 in Hull and did some of the work on Trinity House in the city centre there. A student of his was actually Cuthbert Broderick, he invited him to become a partner with him in his business, but Broderick refused and obviously then set up by himself. And so we're really sort of, I guess, rivals and competitors at this time, because the Lockwood and Mawson didn't get the job of designing or of building Leeds Town Hall, whereas Cuthbert Broderick did. And so Broderick made his name in Leeds, whereas Lockwood and Mawson were largely renowned for their works in Bradford and building of salt air for Titus Salt. So in 1849, Henry Lockwood set up business with William Mawson. There was quite an age difference between the two. Lockwood was experienced at 38 and Mawson was just 21. They moved to Bradford in 1850 after winning a competition in 1849 to design St George's Hall. And it was, I guess, they were chosen by the Lord Mayor at that time as well, Titus Salt, and that's how they came on to build Salt Air. Because William Mawson, he was born in 1828. He was born in Leeds, the son of William Mawson, a paper manufacturer. And age 21, he must have had some bit of architectural training, because he went to work with Henry Lockwood and then was invited, when Cuthbert Broderick declined to become his partner, he stepped in. Maybe it was to do with finance between the two of them, unless the older Henry Lockwood saw something in William Mawson that he didn't have. And so some of the buildings they built here, obviously St George's Hall, that was completed in 1852. The Wool Exchange, which you'll see, completed in 1867, and the City Hall that we're going to look at now, completed in 1873. So it took 4 years to build, that did. Because they also at this time, they must have been incredibly busy, because they built Salt Air between 1851 and 1876. 1874 seems to be partnership fell apart, because Henry Lockwood moved to London and there designed the City Temple in 1873, the Civil Service on the Strand, 1876, and he lived out at Richmond, died there aged 66 on Sunday the 21st of July 1878. Because the firm from 1878 was then known as William and Richard Mawson. This is William Mawson's younger brother coming in there, although I think he'd worked with them for a while. William Mawson, he died in 1899, and that's a plaque on his grave up in Undercliff Cemetery. So just surrounding the City Hall, as you see today, is what they call City Park. This was created over a large number of years and opened in 2012. The pool there, they call it the Mirror Pool. There are 100 fountains in that, because that main fountain going up to 100 feet. Because there's also lighting effects in it as well. And it's shallow in places where it's where you can actually walk across it, even though there's water in it. It's normally only sort of filled in the sort of summer months, I guess from April through to October, and it's drained. That's why you see on the bit of film I've got, you got it drained and with water in, because I've filmed it at 2 different times as well. And so really it's sort of come now surrounded by, there's a photographic gallery, there's I think there's a Weatherspoons pub, there's coffee places and things like that. And so come quite an attractive place around there. The only sort of older building in this square now is the Magistrates Court, which was built in 1872. So the tower that we're looking at there, because it stands 220 feet high, has 13 bells in it, because they're weighing a total of 17 tons of metal in there, and they chime every 15 minutes. But you need to come and look on the front, so along here, because on that frontage, it's
you got these 7-foot high statues of monarchs. There's 35 of them. And to make up the correct number, they've actually included Oliver Cromwell in there, although he was only the great protector and never been a king or a queen either. It ends obviously with Queen Victoria, a statue on there as well. Inside, there's this very fine council chamber as well. But like a lot of town halls, they had a sort of multifunctional, and they also had a police station in the town hall as well. That one stood opposite the, when it was rebuilt in the 1970s, opposite the Odeon. I think that was demolished in 2014 to wait for that extension of it. So it's really clearing a lot of that sort of concrete and steel that sort of hidden most of these places around it. I think there are plans to build again in some parts of that area, which I think is a major mistake, because it's sort of it makes it a very attractive city centre and easy to walk around as well. And so inside, it's got a police station. Like I say, that moved here when it first opened. Like I say, it came a museum in 2014, and really is a history of policing in the borough from 1873 up to 1974. And like I say, you can walk around it as well, and they'll show you up into the council chamber. It's normally open March to the end of November, 11 to 3 o'clock on a Friday, and Saturday from 10 to 4. So that's only 2 days it's open. Prior to the pandemic, it was £4 to go in there as well. It is quite good fun, and to be able to see other parts of the City Hall without, I guess, booking onto a guided tour or anything. So the area outside of it as well is also called Centenary Square, or largely because of centenary of the city being a city when it was created in 1897. One of the things just on the outside, near this sort of overleg, just a bit further over there, is the fire disaster memorial. This sort of happened on Saturday, the 11th of May, 1986, when 56 people died at the fire in Bradford City Football Ground, which is just on the edge of the city centre. The memorial, it's from the twin town of Hamm in Germany, and that's why the sculptor is from Joachim Reichner. He met his wife on a German exchange in Bradford, and she was at the match when the fire took place. In fact, I was in Bradford on the day the fire took place. Didn't realise until we were leaving what had actually happened with all the fire engines around. So coming across there, as you'll see on the piece of film, is there's this arc of sort of cafes and things like that. And in the middle of the arc, there's actually a gap. And so you'll see this on the piece of film. And if you walk through that gap, which is here between Starbucks and Wetherspoons, and go down there, it brings you out to Sunbridge Wells. And this was hidden until this sort of was cleared, because Prudential House stood here, another great sort of concrete block that was in the city centre. That was also, as we'll see, designed by John Brunton and Partners and built in 1972. I must say John Brunton and Partners were responsible for the ruination of most of Bradford City Centre, because they also designed and built the Curt shopping centre as well, and probably other monstrosities as well. But really what we see here behind that's now been opened up in sort of 2016 was the wall behind here of a quarry face, and from out of here water springs came down, and so that's how it gets its name, the Sunbridge Wells. And it's embanked up now. You can see there's some steps that go up the side. Sunbridge Road actually runs over the top of these wells, so you go in through this tunnel, and then there's a network of stairwells, staircases inside there that brings you up onto Sunbridge Road and beyond, because there's lots of sort of entrances coming out of all sorts of different places as well. And so these sort of freshwater springs were sort of developed in the 1700s, this tunnel was built because this was actually used as a prison at that time. In the 1800s, it became a brewery, And like I say, I guess because of the tunnel down here, it would have kept the beer cold as well. And like I say, the Sunbridge Road was built over the top in 1873. This was really the expansion of the city centre, opening up different areas, and obviously it had to be overcome. This did as well. And like I say, the brewery closed in the 1950s and then opened up as various uses, a nightclub at one time that was closed down due to fire regulations as well. And then the upper parts became part of a pub as well. But essentially, it became derelict, the tunnels areas underneath. And in 2006, well, I guess rediscovered, as they say, and eventually opened in 2016 to what now is a number of pubs which lead onto it, and use these stairs to get from one pub to another. I think the idea was that it would prove attractive to people to go in and buy things at food stalls and things like that. But I think that foundered after the first year, and there's nothing else in there apart from sort of bars and there's gym bars and other things. So they're all sort of themed from one another. You can see you can walk from one another. You can see here the Rose and Crown, and that's an entrance that goes out onto Sunbridge Road, I think. One of these other entrances goes out onto another road. And so it's quite a maze of these different roads as you go in. So let's take a break here and have a look at that piece of film, starting off at the City Hall.
So now let's take this other route here. I'm just sort of coming down from where we finished up here. Like I say, those doors out of Tunbridge Wells, I think there's 3 or 4 of them. They all come out at different places as well. And you can easily walk past them, not realizing that the doors that actually take you in. And I think one of them is you got to go through a pub to get onto that staircase to go down. So that's why it's easier to approach it sometimes from the bottom as well. So this time we're going to go up Ivegate, which is one of the original streets of Bradford, and crossing that onto Westgate, another one of the original one. Here we see it crossing with Curt Gate, obviously taking its name from when we go to the cathedral over there. And then coming up here and then looking at the Rawson Market area, and then finishing this section here at the Osler Market there at the top. So one of the buildings down here, we might just catch sight of it at the edge coming down here, is of the Prudential Building. It's a red brick one, which is sort of built in the Prudential style at the time. Although we'll see that building when we come to look at the sort of the Market Street area around here as well. So let's have a look. That's the Prudential Building. It's sort of a building built in a corporate style. I've shown you it before in Scarborough. There's one in Huddersfield, and I guess there's others in Yorkshire as well. It was all designed by the in-house architect called Alfred Waterhouse, and because they're all built largely within the sort of 1890s. This one dates 1895. So Ivegate runs across here, but I'm going to come up this part of Ivegate to begin with, and then later on I'll be coming down the bottom part of Ivegate. Like it's the bottom part which leads onto Market Street, which is blocked at the moment, and there's a sort of arch down there as well, a metallic trestle arch down there. So that's completely blocked off. So I'm going to come up here. This is really one of the oldest roads in Bradford. It's really built around it. And like I say, there's really not much to see up here at all. It's like I say, all the buildings will be sort of the 19th century coming up here. There's nothing in particular to have a look at. Just give you an idea, this is an unusual one. It's got colonnades on the first floor. And it is, although it's pedestrianised, it's a fairly run-down street. There's quite a few charity shops on it. As you'll see, even here on this picture, 2018, a lot of to-lets shops on. And I think there's even more signage on there at all. So it's full of nail bars, tattoo parlours, and because it's a fairly rough end of town. One interesting thing here was this plaque, which has now been boarded over by this tattoo parlour. So it's completely gone, but it was here in 2018, 2021. It's completely gone now, that plaque has. But this was to one of the founders of, I guess, of Methodism in the West Riding, John Nelson. He came from the Birstall Batley area as well. I could say one of sort of John Wesley's assistants, and he was sometimes called the pioneer of Methodism in Yorkshire. Born in Birstall, 1707, and founded the Birstall Methodist Society in 1741. Because they didn't quite like these people going from town to town preaching, and quite often they were drummed out of the place. And like I say, they wanted to enlist him in the army, but he had to find a substitute to take his place. He's buried in Birstall Parish Church, and like I say, there's a brass memorial here to his work that he did in this area on the top of Ivegate. We're coming now to the junction with Curt Gate, and this is where this sort of a monstrous Curt Gate Market is. This is where, up here is the picture here of Lockwood and Mawson's Curt Gate Market. That was completed in 1877, demolished in 1872 for this I'm going to say terribly ugly building, really. I think Costin's actually probably done quite a good job to make it a slightly a bit more prettier. And the other odd thing as well is that for some unknown reason, they've put this sort of access for the lorries and things like that to drop stuff off on this street as well, which has now been pedestrianised, so obviously makes it more difficult. And because it's also on a number of different levels, just past this CAX shop, is that you can go up some moving staircases, because the majority of the shops are on the first floor. because it was designed by Leeds architects John Brunton and Partners. And you wonder whether they actually wanted to make Bradford ugly as part of that sort of war between the two cities. Being terribly badly affected even before the COVID pandemic, with the opening of Bradford Broadway in 2015, we saw a lot of shops relocating down there. So places like W.H. Smith was quite a large shop in here. It was on 2 floors. And now I'd say it's just a single level, very small stall shop down on that Broadway development. Parts of Boots have left here and also gone relocated down there. And so really the opening of Broadway has just juggled the shops around and put them all in one place. And so who knows what they're going to do with this. It's full of, sort of pound shops and other places as well. Even the Primark shop here has moved out. So there's actually thousands of square foot of shop space. On the other side, we're going to come down the other side of this, which comes down Darley Street. We're going up Westgate here. If you look above them, there's some lovely buildings all the way up here. This is another one of the medieval streets as well. And how they've sort of I wouldn't say transformed into anything, but that's the sort of things that you get here. I don't know quite sure what the lemon shed is, but it looks quite salubrious as well. But it's a Victorian architect that we're looking for. And then kind of turn right up this awful building here. I've voted one of the worst buildings in the whole of Yorkshire. It's called High Point. We'll see that is visible from the whole of Bradford. And it's like a nuclear bunker up there, but it dominates a lot of the street scenes. But we're turning on to Godwin Street. Greenwoods is no longer with us. They were founded in Bradford in 1860 and went into administration in 2017. So that's no longer there at all. But you can see they're all named, these buildings, and because they details that they don't put on buildings nowadays to really lift them above the ordinary, because all this expense and no need to have done that where people don't really look up at them as well. So coming along Godwin Street, because this is coming onto the sort of the Rawson Market area around here. It's quite unusual is that they've sort of kept some of these things. These were the fishmongers on the outside of here now, which are all mobile phone shops and things. There's a cheap jeweller's there, another phones one there, there's a nail bar there. So if you get this sort of idea, but this is where the fish shops were on the outside, similar to what they were on the outside of Halifax Market as well. So coming further around, front of it, you'll see it on the bit of film where the Rawson Market area was. It's sort of been redeveloped. I think it's a Wilko's on the inside now. Coming up Rawson Place here to look at this building at the top here. So really at the top of Bradford now, and this is the Masonic Hall up here, built 1876 as the date says up there. The architect was James Ledingham. He was born 1849, died 1926. He's a Scottish architect who moved to Bradford in the 1870s. And he went to work, I guess, as an assistant to Andrews and Pepper, and then set up on his own in 1880. His particular area that he built a lot of in Bradford was the Manningham area. It's also very fine up here, although you don't initially see it, but you've got to sort of look again at the tops of buildings. So this is where we come up Rawson Place here. Look over here. This one here, that's the Royal Hotel. Because it says up there, it's now an Oxfam shop on the thing on the bottom, because they had so many visitors, commercial visitors coming into Bradford. They had so many hotels in here to cater for them. You say the architect of that, James Ledingham, as well. That was open in 1887. So to the left of this photograph, that's where the Masonic Hall is. That's looking down to the right-hand side. You're coming up Rawson Place. If on this other side of it, to the right of this photograph here, this is another hotel, the Rawson Hotel. This was built 1899. It did have twin sort of towers on either end of it. And this is where we see that we've sort of got the Wilko over here. This continued on this frontage and had another tower up here.
but a bomb in 1940 hit it and destroyed that part of the shop. So that's why we've got this sort of different building style along here as well. On the opposite side of the road, we've got the Osler Market, because this is a fairly new one as well. And they could say it was to replace the Rawson Market, but sort of come disused and then being made into actual shops and not really a market itself. So they built this. This has sort of been first in sort of 1958, and then they've renewed it and restored it as well. And they could say it did include a Morrison store in here. Morrison's home of Bradford is its home, but it couldn't make it work in here and closed the supermarket here in 2016. So that's another large redundant area of this. It's quite interesting shop here because there's quite a lot of ethnic food retailers in there, and so there's sort of smells from all the way around the world. There's still got fishmongers in there and butchers as well. Although I have to say, but when I was in there on Saturday, the market manager was on the outside. He asked me what I was doing, and I told him, and he said, "Oh, if I'd been there an hour or two earlier, the police and an ambulance came around here because someone had died of taking drugs." And I think that's really is quite a lot of a story of Bradford when I was around there on last Saturday. I can say it really needs getting a grip of around there. So that's the Osler Market. I think I've got a picture of it inside of it here. It's quite a lot of variety in there. That's the butchers there beyond there. And just a picture at the end of this road of High Point. This was built for the Yorkshire Building Society sometime in the early 1970s in this sort of brutalist style. Obviously, the Yorkshire Building Society didn't like it because they moved out towards the end of the M621, probably about 20 years ago, and left this building behind. And it's called High Point because it stands on top of the hill, can be seen from everywhere. And also designed by John Brunt and partners. So that's the three of the ugliest buildings that we've seen so far. And I'd say now it's more of a home for mobile masts on the top of it. It's built on the side of Old Bradford Manor House as well. It's dated from 1678. It has got planning permission to convert it into a hotel, 93 apartments and 4 floors of offices as well. The initial developer in 2008, I guess due to the financial crisis, pulled out, and they keep on marketing as though something is about to happen with it, but I think the best option will be to pull it down, because I can't see that if you're living in there that you might have a good view outwards if you actually get a window. But I presume that there's not really, it must be a very dark building to be in. So that's coming to the end of that area. So I'll just show you that film coming up Ivegate to finish at High Point. So now we're going to come up the side of Osler Market on Northgate. This is why Osler Market gets its name from, because the statue there of Richard Osler. Then coming along here onto Manor Road, this is where the Yorkshire Penny Bank is, a lovely building as well. And then coming down Manor Row here, because a more commercial part of Bradford, and coming down to Forster Square, and then I'll be coming down Darley Street a little later on. So let's have a quick look along here before we see the film. Coming up Northgate here, heading across here, the Osler Market up the other side there, to come to this statue here. It was called the Factory King. He was the son of a clothing merchant born Leeds, 20th of December 1789. He was educated at the Moravian Full-Neck School on the outskirts of Pudsey, because he was a Tory, and because they opposed to universal suffrage. That was the right for both men and women to have the vote. He was against trade unions as well, and he also supported the sort of class structure as well. So it was quite surprising that he came to be known as the Factory King. And but he thought it was a responsibility of these people with wealth to protect the weak and vulnerable. And he was responsible for the 10 Hours Act that first came in and covered women and children from the age 13 to 18 from working more than 10 hours a day. But it only covered certain workers, and these were largely within the textile industry, so it didn't cover the coal mining or engineering industry, but it was largely women working in the coal mines, which were banned at the same time as this. It was extended to all other people with the Factory Act of 1850. His statue was unveiled 15th of May 1969, because it was created in 1968 by sculptor John Burney Phillip, who also created the Albert Memorial in Hyde Park. Because it's been moved around. We'll see the statue of of Edward Forster has moved around, whose name gave it to the railway station down there. Seems not quite to do with these statues in Bradford, either putting them into storage for 20 or 30 years or whatever. So he's up here. And because one of his famous quotes was, very often the children are awakened by their parents at 4 in the morning. They are pulled out of bed when almost asleep. The younger children are carried on the backs of the older children asleep to the mill. And they see no more of their parents till they get home at night and are then sent to bed. And so, because his campaigning work went right back to the 1830s as well. Like I say, it wasn't until 1867, 6 years after his after the act, but it applied to every place of manufacture or work in Britain. Died in Harrogate on the 22nd of August 1861, but is buried at St Stephen's Parish Church at Curt, where I've shown it before on there. Is in a vault which can only be seen from the outside, because the St Stephen's Church, which is on Burley Road above the main road at Kirksall, was extended, and the family vault was built over the family vault. So you go to the outside and look underneath the extension, you can see his grave under there. Unfortunately, I think it's covered in chicken wire, which actually makes it very hard to see. So let's move along Northgate now, where it comes out onto North Parade. You'll see this on the bit of film anyway. So North Parade, I think, is one of the finest streets of Victorian architecture in the city, for a complete street here as well. Because there's a variety of buildings, again, largely built in the late 19th century. I'm going to start at the other end first. It's not on the bit of film, but it's nearer the sort of Royal Hotel end. Sorry, I'm going to say that. I'll skip to the end street first. This is Gazelle House, which is just around. You can see the Royal Hotel from it. Interesting, largely because it's got this sort of arts and crafts in here, and really sort of an art, sort of, I guess, Art Deco as well. So this is a 1930s fronted shop. Across the street from it, I'll go back one for this one, is the Church Institute. This opened in 1873 as a library and lecture hall. I guess this was designed by Andrews and Pepper as well. We'll see a bit more about them a bit later on. Because it's got two sculptures on the front here. If you look at these in the roundels here, we've got the Archbishop Sharp, 1644 to 1713, he was born, and the other one here is Bishop Blaise, very important bishop to Bradford. He was the saint of wool combers, a very dangerous trade. It's where they heated combs and pulled it through the wool to get rid of the grease, but it creates a lot of fumes. I think they used charcoal, did it inside enclosed rooms, so very injurious to their health. We'll see on his picture comes on the outside of the wool exchange as well, and there's a blaze square near the railway station, so very much associated with the city. So the other, I've shown you Gazelle House, and then because they've got that a fantastic landscape up here as well. These other ones, the Church Institute 1873. This is Devonshire House 1898. Further along, some of these buildings out here are 1910. So really, maybe built out from the city centre. So coming right to the end of this parade, it sort of comes to this corner building here, which is the Yorkshire Penny Bank, built 1895. The architect of this, James Leddingham, as well. Interesting to look at the front because it's got the people associated really with the founding of that bank. So in this area here, if you look up, this one here, we've got probably the two financiers behind this. This is Colonel Edward Ackroyd. You'll met him before because he's the Halifax worsted manufacturer who built the All Saints Church just above the city centre there. His former home is now the Bankfield Museum up there. So that's Colonel Edward Ackroyd up there. And I think the other one here is Henry Ripley. I've mentioned him a couple of times because he's only come onto my radar fairly recently when I've been looking at mill villages and things like that. He had Ripleyville, which is out towards the M62 one side of Bradford. It's all gone because it's really, I think, around his dye works, and so he built a model village around that. But the only bits which are left of that are the the old age pensioners building up there as well. The rest of it has been demolished, and so we can't really see what Ripleyville looked like at the time. The other two, which are on the other sides, there's the Peter Bent, who was the first general manager, and John Ward, who was the director as well. And it's all very ornate around here, really gives us the richness really of it, and I guess what you could make from here as well. Just beyond here, there's that bit of dual carriageway called Hamstrasse, which cuts off the city centre from the other side where the Bradford City football ground is. It's now a pub on the inside. This is called the City Gent. And you can see this is the banking hall in here, and you can see how lavish it was. Look at the ceilings up there as well. That's sort of decorative plasterwork, and so it's not just on the outside. With an intention, I guess, to say that they're prosperous and doing well. To say that it was the penny bank that was really established in all sorts of places that maybe only operate an evening a week in small towns where people can come in and make their deposits. But this really was the headquarters where their money came to. So coming down the other side of that is Manor Row, that runs back down into the city centre as well. And a lot of these, sometimes were built as houses. So you can see this one here, which is the North Counties Investment Trust Limited, this was a house behind here. So they've only built out, I guess, across the garden that stood in front of that house as well. Because also the merchants lived up here. And you can see as we come down here, I'll pick out a couple of these as we go down. But because that's where it's been built out from the house. And here, a row of merchants' houses that stands back with their gardens in front of that as well. Because these houses built around about 1820 here. Further down across the road, this is built for the for the Leeds Bradford Canal Company. Again, originally built as a townhouse, I guess they've been, completely remodeled as well. They sort of first built in the 1830s. That be why is that the door isn't central to the front of that, because of maybe there were maybe been two doors here, and that one's been infilled for when it was divided into a house. Came the offices of the Bradford Canal Company in 1868, so that's really before the full extent of it opened. So we had the Leeds Bradford Canal Company, but the Bradford Canal Company only built the Bradford Canal, a 4 mile stretch that went from the city centre all the way out to Shipley, because it had 10 locks and there's a climb or a drop, as you might say, of 86 foot. And opened in 1874, meets the Leeds Liverpool Canal at Thackley, to be more precise, and ended in Forster Square, really at the bottom of the hill, immediately behind this building here. And because the main problems is that it didn't really have enough water. So the Bradford Beck fed into it, but it was a flow of water, so it was often stagnant. And because there were huge warehouses built alongside it, that's why we got Canal Road at the bottom as well. And because I guess its main problem was its lack of flow of water, because it was it terminated at Forster Square, and because there was a lack of, I guess, water being recirculated. And I think the other problem was that people were throwing all sorts of stuff into it to get rid of it. And really, it was the cholera epidemic of 1849, when 400 and odd people died, was blamed on the Bradford Canal. It closed in 1866 in order for engineering works to take place, reopened in 1870, and finally closed in 1922 and subsequently infilled. And really what its use was to bring sometimes textile goods into the town, because it could come down from Liverpool. It brought stone into the town. It didn't really need to bring coal into the town, but it brought other chemicals and things like that for the textile industry that was sort of very bulky. There have been various plans to open the canal, dig it out again, and the council now own 70% of its course. I don't think it's likely that it ever will, because of the sheer cost of doing so. The next property further down on the left-hand side, now called Canberra House, that was built 1835 as the Salem Chapel around here. You can say it's now as offices down there. On the other side of it, as you'll see on the piece of film, is that there's two pictures here. So that picture here is the doorway, over there is the county court, very much associated with justice in Bradford. You'd be quite surprised when you're walking around the streets of what goes on there, but because they've still got a very large magistrates court behind St George's Hall as well. So this is really sort of the part of the story of that. And you see there, got a date here of 1859 up in the front there, and because there's sort of an extension to the side, that's 1899 as well. That's why it's sort of cut and set back. It's got a carriageway in front of it. I guess that's for the magistrate to be pulled up in, and probably the prisoners as well to be taken into court. Coming further down, this is at the sort of junction of the street that comes down from Osler Market. This is the Board of Guardians. It was built 1877, as you can see there, by Andrews and Pepper as well, and later became the registry office for births, marriages and deaths. And that's why it's got the royal coat of arms above the front door there, because it faces onto Piccadilly. The registry office is now in City Hall and has been since 2013. So I've come down Upper Piccadilly to take this photograph, because it lies head onto it. Because if I just swivel around for the next photograph, that's the view you get up Upper Piccadilly, the Rawson Hotel there with its fine tower. You can see how it's lost the back of that as well. And this is the Royal Hotel, the side of that there as well. Some of these, I wonder, are Mawson and Lockwood buildings on here as well.
The finest one you'll see coming down here isn't a business, well, it is a business premises, but it is Broadgate House, sometimes known as Skyline Chambers, built 1883. It wasn't by any of the notable Bradford architects. This was Rhodes Calvert. Find nothing really about him. It's really a large warehouse with, I guess, chambers above it. Because it's huge, 5 stories high. In fact, it's actually 2 buildings, although it looks as one. You can see here just the change at the bottom down here, where the windows here are slightly larger and they're slightly offset at a higher angle down there as well. And really, these ones, I guess, were built around the same time as Little Germany was developed, or perhaps Little Germany become too full and wasn't enough space in there to build something of this size at that time. But really, it was sort of part of that development where this was really for marketing purposes, for warehousing as well, for goods to be taken elsewhere. So the other end of it, so this end of it's 1883, the other end, that small end, 1892, by a company called Fairbank and Wall. Since I was last here in 2018, or certainly looking at this building anyway, a blue plaque has appeared on here to Florence, I guess it's Moser or Moser. It says a philanthropist who endeavoured to overcome the injustices facing working women, because they especially pertinent when we looked at the sort of suffragettes last week, and because they funder of the Bradford Royal Infirmary. I think it says that on my birth certificate for some unknown reason. And because they also setting up sort of nursery provision for women whilst at work. Coming down the sides, this is the end of that massive block of building. We come to the upper entrance to the Forster Square station up here, because it used to be a lot nearer the city centre, and because they've been cut backwards slightly. From here, you can take the steps down to it, because it's really down, I guess, 2 floors. There's a lift in there. You can't get in there at the moment. It's completely closed. But you come down to it. It brings you down to the railway station, named after the MP William Forster, born 1818, died 1886. He was a Liberal MP who represented Bradford for 25 years from 1861. This was originally the terminus for that first line into Bradford, the 1846 line that ran from Leeds down the Aire Valley and then into Bradford here. Then it was extended the following year to go out to Keighley and then out to Shipley, out to Skipton as well. I'm going to say the first station was demolished, and even the second station built in 1890 has been demolished as well. Not always been known as Forster Square, sometimes been called the Midland Station after the railway company that owned the line out here, renamed in 1924 as Forster Square. So trains still operate in and out of there. Reason for coming down here is to look at the next sculpture on this sort of sculpture trail around Bradford. But quite interesting enough is that Bradford gave planning permission for this out-of-town retail park that is actually built just the other side of here. That's where there's free car parking. And it's got all the usual suspects that you find in a large retail place there. And really, that was really the first ones. I think it opened in the 1990s to really to suck the first wave of shops out of there. So people like Next don't have a shop in Bradford, but they had one out here. They came out here because it's free car parking. Yet you can get off the train, walk a couple of minutes there. You can park in that car park, I think, for 4 hours or something. And you can actually walk into the city centre and not pay for anything. And it seems so it was a bit of a silly decision to allow that to be built there. But I guess if it wasn't built there, they would have maybe gone elsewhere. Perhaps that was the thinking behind it. So that's why it's been cut back slightly, because it actually serves that out-of-town shopping. I don't really call it out-of-town shopping centre, but just because it just off the city centre. But it links into the city centre. You can walk along here, and what they tried to do is sort of encourage it to be a bit nicer along here. So we've got this sculpture here. It's called Fibres by Ian Randall, placed here 1997. They call this area, as you can see here, Blades Square.
Now, these are the arches here, nothing to do with the railway particularly, but they hold Manor Row, or it comes lower down here as Cheapside down here. So that's what they're supporting going all the way up there. They said in 2019 that they're going to create these into shops. Well, this was taken last Saturday, March 2021, and there's been no activity there at all. I can't think that any shops would really exist down here, largely because there'd be the only footfall coming through it as those people who arrived on the train or passing through to get to those other shops. In fact, you can't quite see on this photograph here, but there are rather a lot of tents along here for, I'm going to say, the homeless. So let's have a look at the bit of film coming down to here. Well, I'll bring today's session to an end. It's